Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Christ is among us. Good morning. God bless you. I'd like to take you on a journey because most of us have probably had it with the year 2020. So let's try a different century altogether, why don't we? I'd like to take you back to the mid-17th century, the 1650s, a lovely time. Still in the first generations of European colonists here in Virginia, and up north in Massachusetts and elsewhere, just beginning their American experiment. But in the old world, things were not as rosy, not that they were really rosy here, actually, they were quite difficult. They were also difficult there. And in the midst of this, in 1654, was born a young man, Constantine Brancoveanu. His uncle was Stefan, he had two uncles, Stefan and Constantine Brancoveanu, descended from the Byzantine imperial family of the Brancoveanus. And it fell upon him in 1688 to take up the mantle of prince, or voivod, as the term was in that time, of the Principality of Wallachia. Wallachia is 1/3 of the country now known as Romania. It's the southern part of Romania, centered around north of the Danube River, the city of Bucharest, and so forth. And at that time, it was a very difficult time to live because the Romanian people lived in a three-way pincher. To the south, they had the Sultan, the Ottoman Empire, constantly breathing down their neck and treating them like a vassal state, intimidating them into giving tribute and forcing them to be a satellite state. To the west, they had the growing menace of the Habsburgs, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which also set its sights on the regions north, who were not friendly to the Orthodox and had a history of persecution of the Orthodox in their territories. And then to the north and the east, they had Russia, which, though fellow Orthodox, also was ambitious and beginning its move towards expansionist Tsarism. And you had this little, beautiful country in the middle of these three competing states, all trying to control this region and to soak it dry for whatever they could get out of it. It was a very difficult time. But in the midst of this, Voivod Constantine had a good 26-year reign or so, during which he wisely led his people, playing against these pressures, pushing back and forth. Some people criticized him because he was too accommodating to the Ottomans. He didn't go further enough in trying to ally with this group or that group, but he also recognized, perhaps because he was descended from the Byzantine imperial family, that he had a responsibility to his people, and not only his people, but to the whole Orthodox ecumenity, the whole household of God that was under the Ottoman yoke. He understood well that if he rose up too radically against the Ottomans, Orthodox Christians in the Sultanate would suffer. And so he had to play this incredibly delicate and dangerous game. He also, of course, had to fight against the ambitious boyars and his own court. His own uncle had been killed under mysterious circumstances. And his own uncle after him would eventually also suffer a violent fate. It was not a good time to be a ruler. Didn't have a long life expectancy. For all the ambition, it was a terrible job to actually search for, because you were likely to end up on a spike. While he had the opportunity, he did great works. And he's credited with being kind of the last of the medieval kings or princes, and really the first of the modern. He's the bridge. The printing press was established in Bucharest, and it became a source, because it was outside of the Ottoman immediate control, it was an excellent opportunity for Christians to be able to print books. And so he was printing books not only for people in Wallachia, but for Arab Christians, Greek Christians, Bulgarian Christians, Georgian Christians. And so he became a fount of culture and education for the entire Orthodox community in that part of the world, where they desperately needed it. He brought culture to the architecture styles, and it's noted in the Hurej Monastery in particular, which is a UNESCO site today. And so he left a lasting imprint just by his life. But the reason that we're talking about him today, or remembering him today, is that in 1714, after a good run, but after, having too many times kind of tried to play both sides too many times, the Sultan, the Sublime Court, as it was known, called him to task, and he was arrested, and Holy Week, Holy Friday, Holy Saturday, was dragged from his home and taken to Constantinople. There he was imprisoned with his 4 sons. He had 11 children, by the way, 7 daughters and 4 sons. He and his 4 sons and his son-in-law, his steward or counselor, Yannicke, were taken with him. And they suffered 4 months of deprivation in the prison of the 7 Towers in Constantinople. On August 15th, the Feast of the Dormition, which also happened to be his 60th birthday, he was paraded out before a group of dignitaries from the many powers of the world at that time. French, English, Austrian, and Russian among them. There he was told that he and his sons would be let go if they converted to Islam. He'd already lost his fortune. Now all he had was his life and his sons' lives. This is what he said, according to the historians. He said, "Behold, all my fortunes and all I have lost. Let us not lose our souls. Be brave, be manly, my beloved. Ignore death. Look at how much Christ our Savior has endured for us, and with what a shameful death he died. Firmly believe in this, and do not move, nor leave your faith for this life and this world." And so, in front of the court, in front of the public, they began to execute his sons. Constantine Jr., Stefan, Raoul. When they got to the youngest, Matei or Matthew, he was just a child. He began to weep and he cried and he begged his father, "Father, please, let's convert so we can go home the way a child thinks. Let's just get out of here. This is horrible." And according to that record, the father said to his son gently, "Of our kind, none have lost their faith. My son, it is better for us to die 1,000 times than to leave your ancient faith just to live a few more years on earth." And his son, seeing his father's bravery, his resolve, his faith, humbly bowed his head to the sword and received martyrdom as well. And then lastly, Constantine, the father, with his 4 sons and his son-in-law, himself received the crown of martyrdom. Their heads were impaled on spears, displayed in a procession through the city, left outside the gates, and then eventually thrown into the Bosphorus, where the relics were recovered by the Christians and smuggled back to Bucharest, and now lay in their resting place in the St. George the New Church in Bucharest. I was able to venerate their relics, their graves, about 10 years ago when I first went to Romania. It was quite moving. And because of the fact that there was this element of faith involved in their death, made it more than a political assassination, made it more than just a coup d'etat, quite literally, right? And the veneration of them as martyrs, equivalent to the Roman martyrs of ancient times, increased, and then eventually the Church of Romania did canonize them, but actually only about 30 years ago. And about 2 years ago, they were also included into the list of saints on the record of the Russian Orthodox Church as well. So their veneration is growing throughout the world. Their icon is here on the table before you. Now this year, Romanian President Klaus Iohannis signed a decree proclaiming today, August 16th, their feast day, as a national day of remembrance for the Brancoveanu martyrs and of awareness of violence against Christians. This is, I think, a wonderful move by a leader of state in Europe. Pew research has shown that Romania is the most religious country in Europe now. And don't get too proud, because that means that this is more than everybody else. It doesn't mean it's as much as we'd like. In that sense, about 55% of Romanians identify as firm believing, and religion is an important part of their life, so a majority of the people, but it's not a great one. So there's much to be done all over that continent. And they did this, of course, to re-emphasize the role of Christianity in the history of the Romanian people, but also that this is still a major issue in the world today. Violence against Christians is, in fact, at an unprecedented high. We think of terrible times of persecution under Rome, or under the Ottomans, or perhaps under the Bolshevik yoke as the worst times for Christians, but that's not necessarily true. There are many Christians still suffering today. In fact, in 2019, approximately 260 million Christians lived in danger of violence in the world. That's, globally speaking, that's 1 out of every 8. 1 out of every 8. So if every, how many we have, 40 people here, imagine if 5 of you went home and you had to hide that you were at church, or you couldn't tell anybody that you were at church because you might be arrested for it. You couldn't put up your icons. You couldn't make the sign of the cross. You had to lie sometimes about who you are. In 2019, almost 3,000 were killed because they were Christians. That's a rate of about 8 Christians per day. So we have every day, if you have in your home, I have one right behind here, sometimes you see me looking at this wall, I have the calendar of the whole year. But it only has like the kind of the most well-known saints of the day, right? Each day of the calendar in the church has many, many saints listed. But imagine if we had to add 8 names to every day, every year, to actually be complete. That's why we have feasts like Feast of All Saints, because there's just no way. We don't know them all. There are so many who have died, and just in the last few years. 9,488 churches were burned or destroyed worldwide. They're being targeted. They're being targeted right now in Europe, and we're calling them unfortunate incidences and accidents, but there are actually many cases of arson taking place, even in Europe. Not surprisingly, the main source of Christian persecution and violence against Christians remains in the world today Islamic countries, Islamic oppression. In the top 50 countries, those account for 90% of the countries. There are a few countries who are not, and most of them are, surprise, surprise, atheistic communists. So China, Korea, and Vietnam all also persecute Christians. In China in particular, it takes a new slant in that you may be aware of the surveillance state in China and how they're using facial recognition technology, and they're measuring the good citizenship. And it's, you know, it's definitely a communist country. And there's an extra level of fear because you're being monitored by technology all the time. And the only country in the Western Hemisphere that makes the top 50 list is Colombia because of the cartels and the violence that is ever present, unfortunately, in that country for many years now. And Russia actually makes the list, believe it or not, but that's because there's still a lot of regions in the Russian Federation which are Muslim dominant, and it is in those areas that Christians actually face the most persecution. There are certain pressures put upon non-traditional Christian groups, let's say, ones that are not historically rooted in the Russian landscape. So they do have pressure put against groups coming in to evangelize from other countries. But the violent aspect of that is primarily in those Islamic areas. But Islamic areas extend, of course, I'm sure you know, not just to the Middle East. Iraq and Syria, in the last 10 years, we've seen many Christian communities who have been Christians since the apostles. They would like to tell you before the apostles, I imagine, that are disappearing. Entire cities and villages and towns that were dominant Christian communities for 2,000 years are being wiped off the map in Iraq and Syria. That's the worst. But it's also happening all over the place where Christianity has spread. Sub-Saharan Africa, it's a terrible situation. Southeast Asia, Southern Asia, India. These are all places where being a Christian costs you something. I'm not sure, I didn't have a chance to double check. I think it was Bonhoeffer who said the biggest threat to Christians was cheap grace. Is that right? Am I right? Yeah. You know, that it doesn't cost anything for people to be a Christian in the West. We've become so spoiled and so weak, we don't have any idea of the value of this great gift that we have. But in other parts of the world, people are dying, like Constantine Brancoveanu to this day. They are saying, no, I would rather die 1,000 times than turn my back on Jesus Christ. To live a few more years on this earth. They understand it. They understand what is at stake. And we are complaining about masks and quarantines like a bunch of babies. And calling that persecution, which is offensive. Offensive. There are people whose heads are being cut off their necks slowly with blades. Your mask is not a persecution. It's not even close. I hope I don't hear anybody say that. It's just silly. Let us be aware of the real danger in the world for Christians, because we have the opportunity to be a source of support for those countries. But unfortunately, American Christians have been so much with their heads in the wrong places that they're doing nothing as millions of people are being persecuted. We're all crying about which lives matter in this country, while millions and millions of black lives are being snuffed out in Africa because they're Christian. We've got to do more. We've got to raise awareness. We've got to demand our governments do more than just sit back and look like those French and English and Austrian and Russian dignitaries in the Sublime Court, watching while Christians die. So if you want to do something useful with your time, stop worrying about the dumb things that Americans worry about. Start thinking about the global picture. Start thinking about what it's really like to live in fear and in danger of being kidnapped, of being violated, of being executed. And then maybe we'll start to really value the gift of freedom that we have in this country and make a good use of it instead of wasting our time on distractions. So, God bless you. Christ is among us.